So my name is Chris, and I'm from A Simple Life with Chris and Tara. We have a YouTube channel. I do some videos on cast iron restoration and things like that. Does everyone here have cast iron? So I started about 20 years ago. My dad gave me a cast iron skillet, and that kind of started the fire, and I started learning on that skillet and using it, and really kind of fell in love with using cast iron. And then I started searching for cast iron and looking at yard sales and looking at flea markets and different places, and then I would watch more videos, and then I kind of learned how to restore it. And now it's kind of we threw away all the other skillets and things we had, and now it's all cast iron or stainless, and I use the cast iron, and my wife usually uses the stainless. I just kind of like the thought of taking something that's been around for 100 years and using it and restoring it to new so somebody else can enjoy it for another 100 years. Are any of you worried about a smooth glass top? You cook on a smooth glass top stove?
Yes, I thought Mars was going to be over here.
There's no reason not to. I did it for years and years. I've never had an issue. You just have to be careful, careful sitting it down, and you don't really want to drag it. Other than that, it's just like any other stove. Now, the only thing I will say is, if you're cooking on a glass top, you might find a spinner a little more than you want. That one that might spin a little, but it still really doesn't matter. Yeah, I moved, and my new place has gas, and so I've been cooking on that one for the last 3 years, and I kind of like that better. The main thing with cast iron is when you learn to cook on it is low and slow. On my electric or my gas, I never had it above a 2. A 2 is what I can fry bacon and boil water in cast iron on the move. Just 2 to 3 at the most. So the problem most people get into is when they're cooking with it, and why are my eggs always sticking? Why are my potatoes sticking? And it's usually they have the fire too hot, or they don't have enough butter or cheese or oil in it, and then they get into some trouble. But once you learn that low and slow is the way to go with cast iron, it gets way easier. So after you've cooked your meal and it's time to clean it, and that's the other big thing is when you're done cooking and you're done eating and it's cooled off enough that you can handle it, it's good enough. You can clean it then. You don't want to just leave it sit on the stove or in the sink for a couple days waiting on you. So it's best just to clean it. And I know a lot of people are told, don't use soap, don't use soap, don't use soap. And that all comes from, in the old days, soap was made with lye. And you can use lye to strip, like if you're wanting to restore a pan, that's one of the ways you can strip a pan is with lye. You have what's called a lye tank, and it will strip it down. But nowadays, soap don't have lye. So a little squirted on is never going to affect your seasoning. It's never going to hurt anything. When I'm done, I turn the water on hot, a little squirted on, and I have a hard bristle brush, and that gets it out. Now, if you kind of had a boo-boo when you was cooking, and you got some stuff that's really kind of caked on the bottom, you can put a little water in it and boil it. Turn the fire on, get it boiling, and everything will come right up. Come right off, and you can dump it out. And then you can let it cool down a little bit and then start the cleaning from there. But there's nothing wrong with using soap. So once you're done cleaning it, all you really need to do is make sure you get it good and dry. And then some people like to put it back on the oven or the stove top just to warm it up to kind of make sure all the moisture's out. And you can, I've done it both ways. But once you've got it good and dry, then I just like to put like a very light coat of like some olive oil, and you just take a paper towel and rub it all down. So, I mean, you don't want dripping wet. You just want enough that, just like this pan, like I use this pan all the time. It's not oily or greasy, but it has just enough that if I hang it up on my rack and it hangs there for a month, I shouldn't have to worry about anything. So we can kind of talk about the different kinds of cast iron. And I didn't bring the oldest, which would be a spider. So what a spider is, it would have 3 legs on the bottom. And this would have went in the coals and kept it up off the coals. Now those can go back to 1700s. But the kind you're most likely to possibly find being old will be what's called a gate marked pan. So if you see it, it looks like it has a big scar across it. So this is called the gate mark. So this was the style, and that comes from when they would pour it in the mold. That's where they would pour in all the iron, and this was the scar when it come out of the mold. That's basically where it got poured in. And with these old gate mark pans, a lot of times the handle for one will be different. Like a normal pan, it's going to look like this. But a gate mark pan, they were sometimes had fancier handles. So a lot of people call these fancy handles because they couldn't put all that design on the bottom because this big scar is going to be on here. So they would sometimes make the handles more decorative. And like here's a gate mark griddle. So kind of is the same thing. It curves up. It's a little fancier. It's not just a smooth blob. And then around 1900, they switched. And they went from pouring it on the bottom to pouring it on the side. So you get poured, and that's when you start seeing things like the Griswold, the Wagner's. They start doing more decoration on the bottom. And then you can just kind of start learning the different brands, and you'll know when you look at one what kind it is. But they would be poured from the side, and then when they come out of the mold, they grind that. So they don't have this scar on the side, it's ground. So you might see some grind marks on the side sometimes, and that's just where it was poured into the mold. And that started around 1900. So if you find one that's got the scar, it's usually pre-1900. And there are some people that try to fake it. They'll take a pan and they'll like weld across here and try to make it look like a scar, so they think that's a gate mark. But you'll start to learn what the fake ones are. And then there's also enameled pins. So this one's kind of rare because this is actually a gate marked enamel, which you don't see very often because the gate marks are so old. But a lot of times you'll see like Lodge has a new enamel Dutch oven or different things, but they've been enameling them for a long time. And they're kind of nice. They're a little bit smoother. You would care for it the same way. You would clean it the same way. This one's actually kind of both because it's enamel and it's also this cast iron. The main advantage is the older the pan you find, the lighter it is. It's lighter, and generally it's smoother. And a lot of times on certain pans, if you look in the bottom, it'll look kind of like a swirl. And that's because in the plant, they had a big stone that was like on a press and it turned. So sometimes you can find one that has a swirl mark. But don't get that confused with grind marks. Because the one thing we don't want to do if we find one at the yard sales, we take it home and take our grinder to it or sandblast it. Because if you do that, if it's a vintage pan, you just ruined it as far as any kind of value. I mean, you can still keep it and use it, that's no problem. But as far as that pan having any kind of value, you killed it if you ever touch it with a grinder. So you really don't want to do that. And then about in the 60s and 70s, they started getting a little heavier, a little thicker, and this is a new, so this is, you can go to Walmart and get one of these right now. And this is Lodge's, this would be their new design, you know. They started this really about 1992 with this design. But you'll notice how rough they are. And people, a lot of times people don't like how rough they are. They want the smooth cast iron. So The only thing I would say about not grinding is if you went and bought a new one at Walmart, go for it. Because if you really want it smooth, this man's never really going to have any value other than to use. So, I mean, if you want to take a new one and grind it because you want it to be smooth, you've not ruined anything like you did if you took an old one. And a lot of people are like, why are they just cheaping out? Why is it so rough? Why can't they be smooth like the old ones? And the reason for this is, in the old days when you would go to the store and buy one of these pans, you would have to take it home and season it yourself. So they would put lard on it and put it in the oven and for an hour and get it seasoned up themselves. Well, nowadays, Lodge seasons them for you. So you could go to Walmart and buy this pan and take it home and use it tonight. It's all done. So when it's going down the assembly line and it's hanging on a hook, they found that they had to have this texture for the spray, when they spray the seasoning on, and then it goes through the oven. If they didn't, it was going to run. The seasoning was going to run. So that's why they're rough like that. Now, if you really can't find vintage cast iron and you really want it to be smooth and you don't want to mess with grinding, there are brands, and these brands, some of them are Finex, Stargazer, Smithy, Lancaster, and Field. They make brand new cast iron pans that are slick, and I'm not going to say they're as light as the old stuff, but they are smooth, but they are pretty expensive. Like generally, just a regular little number 8 is going to start at between $150 and $200 if you want one of those new brands that are smooth, to where you can go to Walmart and buy this one for like $30. So, I didn't bring one up, but a Dutch oven, a true Dutch oven, the lid will be recessed. It will not be like a dome, because you would put your charcoal briquettes or charcoal on the top, because this was used as an oven before they even had like the old wood stove ovens. They would put their bread or whatever they're baking and then put the charcoal on the top and sit it on the bed of coals, and it just is going to bake it like an oven. So now they have, some people call them bean pots, but some companies still refer to them as Dutch ovens, but it's going to have like a dome lid, so you're really not going to be able to put charcoal briquettes of any kind on top. It's just going to slide off. So to find a true Dutch oven, it should have like a recessed lid. And then there are, there's all kinds of bean pots, so like saucepans, there's griddles, there's cast iron bread loaf pans, then there's, the cornbread pans. So a lot of people find these, and so they pour their cornbread batter mix in here. And they also make a cornbread pan that is round, like this, but it has like pie pieces in it. They're little triangles. So those are a couple of different kind of cornbread pans that they make. And then back in the old days, they also had toys. So when little kids wanted to play like mom and dad, so here is like a toy size cast iron. So this is the toy size version of this. And they would make these in different sizes too. You could get a 5-stick, a 7-stick, a 9-stick. These would come in all different sizes. And different brands were different. You can kind of tell by, like this one's a Wagner because it says it on the bottom, but a lot of times they don't say anything on the bottom. You just have to look at this. The handle parts are made different, and some of them, all the corn cobs go the same way, some of them alternate. Everybody kind of had their own way to distinguish themselves from other people. But it's kind of rare sometimes to find the little toys. I find them kind of interesting. There's even a little toy Dutch oven, but I don't have one of those. Now when it comes, and I almost forgot, they even make cast iron woks. So this one is a Lodge, and it's not real old. This one's probably like from the 70s. And they have two versions of this one. One has the handle like this, and one has a handle like this on both sides. So for people who want to cook with a wok, there is an option out there. So now, say you went to the garage sale and you found one, and we know not to grind it or sandblast it. How do we clean it? So there's a couple different ways to strip them. And now, I will say one of the ways that the old timers would have done it would be to put it in the fire. They're going to put it in the fire and try and cook off that carbon. A lot of times they'll get carbon built up. That's the black stuff that's on them. Now, some people who really know what they're doing can get away with that, but it's a pretty iffy thing, because if you leave it in the fire too long and it glows red, the smell is going to turn like a pinkish color once it cools off, and you'll never get the seasoning to stick to it. So it's kind of a ruined pan. So I like to use what's called an E-tank, which is short for electrolysis. So that's how I generally strip and clean mine. So I like to use it because it's like the only way that will remove rust and carbon both. And it's really not dangerous as far as fumes. And so if you just had a pan that had rust in it, you could get away with 50-50 vinegar and water, and you could put that like in a tote, a plastic tote, and you could put your pan down in it. And if you just had one that had some rust on it, you can put it in there. But generally, kind of one day you want to be checking on it, because if you kind of forget about that and leave it in there, it'll just disintegrate the whole pan. So you just want to leave it in for a little while and then take it out. Use your Dawn, clean it up. Maybe like I use when I'm restoring mine, when I take them out of my E-tank or out of the vinegar tank, I use a stainless scour pad. It's like a kind of a Brillo looking metal pad. And I'll use the Dawn in the sink and just kind of scrub it, and it kind of just helps clean everything up, but it's not as bad as abrasive as like a grinding. It's just kind of taking off, getting it slicked up so you're ready to season it. And then I wash it with soap and water, just like when you're cleaning it. Now, if one just would have carbon on it and not rusted, and you wanted to clean it, that's where you can use lye. So you can make a tank with lye, and it'll remove the carbon, but you really need to kind of have a mask and wear rubber gloves. It's like liquid plumber. If you look, it's made with lye, and you can have a tank with that, and you can submerge them, and that'll clean off carbon, but it won't necessarily take off rust. So that's why I like to use the E-tank the best. So it uses electricity and water, which sounds scary, but I have made them with just a plastic tote before. My current one is like 55-gallon plastic drum, and it has a stainless steel wash machine drum, fits right down in it. And then you hook, you need like a battery charger, but it has to kind of be an older battery charger, a manual one. You can't use like a new automatic battery charger, it won't work. But you end up hanging your pan from a stainless hook, and then you use the positive goes to my stainless drum, or you can just put metal rods. Any kind of metal will work. Stainless is kind of the best. And then you hook the negative to this. And what it does is it just makes tiny little microscopic bubbles will start coming off of this. And you can just, as soon as you hook it up, you're going to see them start coming off. And it's going to take all the junk and take it out to that metal that you put in there. That's kind of your sacrificial metal that goes around. And stainless, I use that just because it lasts the longest. And it just takes it all the way back down to bare cast iron. So it could take, if you have one that's not too bad, you might leave it in it a day or two. If you have one that's really kind of rough, I've left them in for a week before, but it's fine. And when you think about the electricity and water, you start getting worried, because the water has Arm & Hammer super washing soda in it. And there's a ratio, and you can look it up. I think it's half a cup per 5 gallons is actually what it is. And as your E-tank evaporates, the water will evaporate. Your super washing soda never evaporates. So all you'll ever have to do is add a little more water, and you're good. But I found that's the best way to clean them. And you can stick your hand right in the water while this is going. It's not going to shock you. I know you think, oh my gosh, it's got the electricity hooked to it, steer clear of the water, but I don't know why I can explain it, but the way it works, the electricity is going down through the pan, not into the water. You won't be shocked. And then once it comes out of the E-tank, you kind of treat it the same way as after you're done cooking. You're just going to clean. And with an E-tank, you can clean more than just cast iron. You may have an old rusty crescent wrench. You can put that in the E-tank. It'll clean it. If you got a wheel or a gear that you need to take the stuff off of, the gunk, it'll clean it. So an E-tank has a lot of uses, and there's lots of videos. I have a video setting up my E-tank on our channel, and there's lots of information online about building E-tanks. And like I said, I've just made them out of a simple plastic tote before. I just expanded so I could put bigger pans in, because when you have little pans, it's not too big a deal. But when you get a big pan, it has to hang down so that the metal can see, it can get it from all sides. If you would hang something in front, like you can only clean one pan basically at a time, because if I had two hanging in there, this is blocking this one from it being able to take the stuff to the sacrificial metal. So when it's finally time to season, what I do is I put my oven on 250 degrees, and I put the pans in there for half an hour. And what that does is it opens up the pores in the cast iron. So then you'll take it out, and I like to use a product called Buzzy Wax. So it's kind of a combination of beeswax and some different oils, and they make an organic version, and I used to use Crisco, but when you're seasoning, it's gonna put off some smoke. Be warned, like you're getting some smoke a little bit in your house. My wife just really did not like the smell of the Crisco smoke. So the Buzzy Wax works good. You can get it online. After it's been in there for half an hour, 250, take it out, put a little bit of whatever oil or wax you're using. I use like a t-shirt or something like 100% cotton. Rub it all down, and then what I like to use are those blue shop towels, like you get at AutoZone, and they don't tend to leave any kind of lint or anything on there. And then you want to rub that oil off. I mean, rub it like you're allergic to it. You think I'm going to leave it on a little heavy, so I'm going to have a nice thick layer. But what's going to happen is when you take that pan out, it's going to look like leopard spots all over it. It's going to be able to strip it all over again. So, I mean, you want to rub that oil off as best as you can. And believe me, it's still going to be there. It's going to be in those pores. And then you're going to put it in your oven upside down for an hour at 450. So after the hour's over, now you really got to be careful, because when you take it out at 250, it's not, you can be pretty careful and not get burnt. Now when you take it out at 450, prepare to be burnt, because it always seems to happen, because we're going to repeat the process. So I generally like to do 3 coats of seasoning on my pans when I'm restoring them. You can do as many as you want. So after you've done your 3 coats, same process each time. Then just cut your oven off after that last hour and leave it sit so it can slowly cool down. Because we wouldn't want to just take it out and then, especially if it's winter time, if it cools too fast, it could warp, who knows what. So I just leave it in there, turn the oven off, let it sit, usually overnight. It cools down, take it out the next day, and then I'll give it a pretty good coat of oil, because it seems to soak up a nice amount. Rub it all on there real good, and then you're good to go. It should be good for a long time. Now somebody earlier asked me about, they sell it's almost like a chain mesh to clean them with, and I have one of those, and I have used it, and it does work, but I've noticed it can be a little rough on your seasoning sometimes. So generally, just the Dawn and a heavy bristle brush, and sometimes you can use like a little plastic scraper or something, if you got something that's kind of stuck in there. But that works fine with me. I mean, they sell those things, and you can use them, but it seems a little hard. Like I can see scratches in my seasoning sometimes when I use that. And I don't like that. To me, I think food just tastes better when you cook it in cast iron. I don't know what it is. Some people say, that if you're iron deficient, it's good to cook in cast iron. It helps. I don't know how much iron you're going to get cooking in it, but to me, the food just has a better taste. I have several videos on restoring different pieces of cast iron. Like I have a video on restoring this. This is called carbon steel, and some people refer to these as cowboy skillets, like maybe hanging on the old truck wagons. Now, I used to kind of turn my nose up at these when I saw them for sale at different places, and you can pick these up really cheap. But I went ahead and I did a video on restoring this one, and I found that this is my favorite go-to egg pan now. Eggs, fried eggs, scrambled eggs, omelets, even grilled cheese, nothing sticks in this pan. And the main thing is they're way lighter, super light. So if you happen to find one of these, don't just think, in cast iron, I'm not interested. Because these can be helpful. A lot of people don't want to use cast iron anymore because it's just so heavy and they have a hard time holding it. So this might be a good option. I know, we all know not to put it in the dishwasher, right? Don't put it in the dishwasher, bad news. You're gonna open your dishwasher and there's gonna be a big rusty mess come out. And I have got those before and restored them for people that made the mistake, but never put your cast iron in the dishwasher. Bad news. And a lot of people are just kind of scared to try it. They might even have one, they're like, I don't want to mess it up. For those people, I say, go to Walmart, buy this cheap $30 pan, and practice with it. So once you get pretty good and feel confident, that's when you go out and spend the money on a nice vintage piece, or maybe one of the new pieces that are smooth. But you can start out with one of these so you can, learn the ropes, learn what works and what don't. And then you'll have something that you can kind of cast on to your family members. Some people, I find that a lot of older people remember, oh, that was my grandma's skillet, or, it's important to them. Even if they don't use it, they like to hang in their kitchen just to look at. So they even have cast iron waffle makers. So this would be a waffle maker. You can find these as well. So you pour your batter in there, and then this is called a high base. So they sell a high base and a low base, and this just fits in here. So back then it would have went on their stove and cooked, and then once it's done on this side, just turn it over. And one last thing I wanted to talk about is the sizes. So when you see a number 8, this is number 8, that doesn't mean anything to do with 8 inches. The number 8 refers to, in the old days, on the old wood cook stoves, they would have holes with the little plates you would take out, and those are the hole sizes. So there would be like a number 5 hole, so mom knows she needs a number 5 skillet to fit that hole perfectly. And it might have a ring like this to seal perfectly when you sit it on those old stoves. So generally, a number 8 is going to be 9 or 10 inches across, actually. And if you find a number 10, it might be 12 inches across. So the number doesn't really refer to the size. It's referring to the old stoves, and that just kind of became the norm for them to put them. And a lot of times they'll have the number like on the handle, either raised or sunk in, or on the bottom somewhere. But just because you see number 8, it doesn't mean it's an 8-inch skillet. If anybody has any questions? So I like to use wood, or I use like a metal spatula when I'm doing my little thing, or like a stainless whisk. But I don't use any kind of plastic or silicone. I don't use that. I don't pickle with that. The same reason that we do away all Teflon and steer clear of anything plastic. I'm sorry for that. I've never. I guess if you were really gouging on it, you could scratch it if you had a metal. But generally, normal usage, your seasoning should protect it. If you just use your spatula or whisk or experiment with a spoon. But I use wood unless I don't really have a good wood spatula, so that's why I use the metal one, but wood or metal. A lid? Yes, so some cast iron, they do have cast iron lids. Now I have found that using the cast iron lid, before I forget, we're going to give this away today. So everybody needs to look under their seat. And somebody's got something that says yay under their seat. And whoever's got the yay.
Well, actually, I think it fell off.
Uh-oh.
But I see it laying there.
My co-pilot back there is,
yay!
Oh, there's our winner. So he can come up and get his skillet and he can start life using the cast iron. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, I'm just back there. I have some cast iron. If anybody is looking to buy some, feel free to come look. We have videos. Like I said, our channel is A Simple Life with Chris and Ted. And we have a little bit of everything. We have about gardens and chicken. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Hope you had a good time.